Hello everyone and welcome to our new video. In this video, we are going to discuss about the Canary testing, and we are going to understand the Canary testing, how you can use the Canary testing, and basically how this can help you to do the better deployments by simulating the real world conditions. Now, the Canary testing that we are going to discuss today will be later we are going to include a practical scenario on how you can implement the Canary testing in case of Kubernetes. But the same Canary testing can also be replicated in the VM environment, or if you are even running on the EC2 instances. So basically, this Canary testing, the approach of the Canary testing remains the same. The way that you deploy, the implementation becomes different, that we are going to cover in our later video. So let's get started on the Canary testing. So this is what we are going to discuss. This is our topic for today, the Canary testing. Now, if you look at the Canary testing is a very powerful tool which allows you to set up the CI/CD pipelines. Now, CI/CD pipelines, we already have discussed about this in our previous videos, but this basically allows the developers to build and deploy their code uh, in a real environment, or like in the from the dev environment to the production environment in a very smooth way. By uh, every time they deploy in the lower environment, they can keep iterating to the run the test cases, test their code. If everything is good, they can actually move on to the upper environment, and this is how eventually it gets deployed into the production environment. Now, the CI/CD becomes important for all the businesses out there because this helps them to move fast, which is a primary requirement, because the code which you are writing, your competitors might be faster than you. So you need to gain an edge, you need to iterate fast, and you need to make sure if the things are failing, you are able to handle them in a pretty neat way. This is where the CI/CD actually helps the businesses to realize the true potential, and this allows the developers to deploy the code as soon as possible when they write it, without worrying about the way that the deployment would actually be conducted. So these are the CI/CD pipelines are pretty much useful, and the today's topic, the Canary testing, is related to the same. So if we look at the Canary testing, there are a few of the ways which are currently available to us, which allows us to detect the bugs and the issues with our code, such as like unit test, integration testing, and the manual testing. These are some of the ways which are already available, and these are being implemented. But if you look at these unit tests, integration tests, and the manual testing, they basically belongs, you can do it in a non-prod, like the staging kind of an environment, where it helps you to increase the confidence for your deployments. But eventually, if you look at all these tests, they do not perfectly replicate your real world environment. What this means is that even though you are going to make some requests, your testing team makes requests and tries to test this manually, but eventually they are not able to replicate the real world case scenarios where your how your actual requests are coming. And this is the reason that you will find that even after doing all these testings, we might face an issue into the production environment. So we continuously try to make this as real as possible. We try to simulate as real as possible the request to test the application in a better way. But even if after trying you cannot it's not really possible to replicate the real world usage of the application. This is where the Canary testing becomes so important, because it allows you to push to a small number of users. Now, this is very important to understand, that if you are implementing the Canary testing, then eventually you are going to push the changes to a small number of users. Now, these users might not be aware, should not be aware about the changes that we are doing. Okay, even though the changes are being done in the background, but they should be completely unaware of these changes, that the new code has been implemented, and they should know there should not be any disruption whatsoever. So this allows us to see basically how our new code, okay, is performing. This becomes very important because once you initiate the Canary testing, you can test your new code, okay, And this new code again you will be testing this on a real world application, right? So the real world request will be coming. So if any bugs or anything is being reported, you can be actually sure that those things would be reported in a real world request when you do the actual deployment, right? So this becomes important, that none of the bugs should be bigger enough to cause a failure, right? So you can detect this at a very initial stage when the request is only going to a small number of users. Now, here, let's go towards a visualization. So if basically, let's try and understand how this canary testing basically looks like. So when we are not doing any testing and not making any changes to our application, the application is just running and the users are just using it. So how our application is running, basically, you will find that there, in case of Kubernetes, you basically create a service which basically acts like your load balancer, and there are multiple pods which are running, and this is running quite smoothly because you are not making any changes to it. So eventually all the traffic is getting load balanced and being served by your pods. So this is where the this is how your app infrastructure looks when you are basically running the old code. When I say old code, this is a code which has already been deployed and getting used. So this results into my old code. Okay, now what happens is, let's say we want to introduce the new code, right? This is where we find that the challenges will be coming. This is where the canary testing would help us. Okay, so this is your old code. Now if I want to do a canary testing, okay, so what I will have to do is I will be adding and few more instances. So suppose I can add an additional pod here. Now this pod, okay, the pod 4 will be running our new code. Okay, now you might add one or two pod depending upon the application size that you are running for doing the canary testing, which allows you to basically go through the request with the new code. Okay, now this pod 4 that comes up, it will be running our new code. Okay, so this pod 4 comes up with the new code. Now this is important because you will find that at a point in time, now both my old code and my new code is live at this point, but the new code is only live out of the, let's say there are three instances, three pods running right now. So out of three pods, only one pod is running the new code. Now obviously this will be much bigger in the real world environment, but this basically helps us to identify that any point in time when we start with the canary testing, okay, then we can basically see this kind of an environment setup where our old code and the new code are basically running side by side, and there is a very small proportion of requests from the user which will be going to the service, and then service is basically relaying those requests to our new pod that we have created. So this way we can actually gather the data and see how the performance of our new code is happening in the real world. Okay, and this will allow us to initially detect the problem. Suppose if the code is having some issues or it's not working or there is some bugs, so all these we will be able to detect, because we have right now only replaced one pod, right? So out of like four pod, about my only one of the pod is going to get the request on the new code. And even if the new code is having some problem, not all of my users will be affected, only a very small portion of the users will be affected, because we are because the old application code is still running. Now once you have done this, okay, and you basically utilize your Elasticsearch cluster or log analyzing or the other monitoring tools which you have implemented, the dashboards are looking good, the performance is looking good, you are not seeing the error. This will increase your confidence for or going ahead and moving ahead with the deployment and deploying this in the production environment. So you can go ahead, and at this time you will feel pretty much confident, and this will because you already know that the code is working on the pod 4. So eventually when you replace pod 1, pod 2, pod 3, with the newer pods, then you will find that eventually this code will be working on the new pods as well. So this is how the Canary testing can actually uh, uh, reduce the failures in case of deployments, at the same time allow you to do a real world testing. And even if the pod, like the newer deployment, the newer code is having some issues, so only a very small portion of our users will be affected in a very controlled manner, and eventually if something bad is being detected, we can go ahead and remove this pod from the service. And as we do that, the new code, if it's having some issue, that will be eventually removed. So there will be a very small window where our users face some issue, and that to a very small amount of users. So this basically helps us to prevent any issues with the new deployment. Now you will find that the bigger companies like Netflix, they have basically the Canary testing built into all their rollouts, and all their application uses the Canary testing. Now, how they basically test it out is that they basically collect the various matrices from the where the new code is running. Okay, and they basically plot it on a dashboard. This helps them to get a realistic view of the overall application, both from the system as well as the application perspective, logging and monitoring. So everything, those kind of matrices and the dashboards basically can help you to detect if you are having some issue with your new code. And you can deploy the you can gain more confidence with the CI/CD pipeline. So what we see is that Canary testing is a great tool which helps us to increase our confidence. It will help you to deploy more number of deployments in going ahead. You can do a real world testing, and if something goes back, you can easily fall back and get it resolved and process with the deployment in future without affecting your user. So considering all of these benefits of the Canary testing, this is actually built into the Kubernetes cluster. So if you want, you can go ahead and implement this Canary testing in case of the Kubernetes as well. This is what we are going to discuss in our next video, where we are going to see how we can implement this Canary testing in case of Kubernetes, and how we can optimize our builds using the Canary testing, and help the developers to iterate much more faster in a much more controlled manner without affecting the users, and thus helping the organizations to make the proper usage of the Canary testing in case of Kubernetes cluster. All right, so that's all for the theoretical part of the Canary testing. In our next video, we will be going ahead with a practical implementation of this Canary testing in case of Kubernetes. Thank you, everyone. If you have not subscribed to our channel, I will suggest you to subscribe for getting these videos as soon as they are we basically create them. Thank you.